Hey, everybody, welcome back to Inside the Matrix. And today we are bringing back someone that many of you know very well, and he's been on the show many times before. And we're happy to have him back and for him to share his wisdom with us today. Shane, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, brother. Good to see you again, of course, and good evening.
Good to see you too. And for those three or four people who don't know who you are, would you mind giving us just a kind of a thumbnail background on where you came from? And I mean, your story is really amazing, and most of us know it, but a few probably don't.
Well, as the story goes, my name's Shane. I grew up in what the alternative community knows as the Illuminati, the programs, projects, and cults associated with all of that. Had a kind of unique upbringing through it, and at one point in time ended up as a way to communicate to some individuals I knew personally who had been in the same programs, projects, and cults I had been. I started a blog and was writing the blog for them, at which time the alternative community found the blog, and the rest is history, as they say. Remained anonymous for a while, and then decided not to step up behind the responsibility I kind of created for myself by allowing you guys to find the blog in the first place. So that brings us right to the end of that. Since then, I've just been trying to help people make sense of the various streams of information that come through the alternative community, as well as the world in general, as it continues to go crazy. And that's about that.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Um, okay, so let's start with the last couple of years. It's been a while since you were on the show. I'm not sure. Maybe I was on your show maybe a year ago or something. I think it's almost 2 years, I think, since you've been on this show. Anyway, since all the Rona nonsense and all of that, we've seen an uptick in the powers that be, that shouldn't be, really, cranking up their program. And so we got the World Economic Forum and Nazi Klaus Schwab and all of that crowd, the Bilderberg crowd and all that. Really, everything is totally out in the open now. They've amped up their program. Nothing's really hidden unless you're just not paying any attention whatsoever. They've already told us what they're going to do. So give us your thoughts on the amping up of the program and why and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's exactly the plan I wrote into the blog, right? It's everything I said they were going to do, they have done and continue to do, which is really just kind of giving the people what they want with a price tag that they don't know about attached to it. And obviously their usual mechanism of problem, reaction, solution, always employed, and obviously was in this particular situation. So I guess I'm a little bit surprised at how well it's worked. I'm a little bit impressed by how many people have woken up to it. And other than that, everything's going exactly as I expected it to. Maybe not the mechanism like the joy, as I call it. I think you just called it Rona, but maybe not that particular thing. But that's just one of many different variables that they could throw at us in order to achieve certain goals. And I think that we'll just see them continue to do that until this is all done, which is what everyone is affectionately calling the Great Reset.
Okay, so the next question is, are we making a dent in their plans? Are we doing anything whatsoever to, thwart what they're doing or to slow them down? Or are they just, they have their controlled opposition minions out there? Of course, we know that. Are we actually making a difference, or is this just rolling right along according to plan?
Well, I mean, subtle differences in that, the more we catch on to what they're doing and point it out, the less options they have to pull off, right? Like I always use the false flag alien invasion idea as one example. We've talked about that so much, there's no way they'll even bother attempting it, right? Like there's forum after forum after forum that people would find on the internet. If they were to try and attempt that, that would make it very obvious. Right now with the science religion, using science on a microscopic level, such as a virus or something that we can't see, an invisible enemy, is still working for them and will probably continue to work for them, because once again, it's not something we can see. So it's really easy for them to lie about it. Whereas if they try to do something bigger, a little bit harder for them to lie about it. And we have some backtracking. So to answer the question, because we've kind of pointed in so many directions, we've limited the directions they can take, but we haven't shut them all down. And they obviously have what I would call big actions they could take, like, actually starting a real war or something to that effect, actually causing some type of major chaos somewhere like the US or maybe Canada. There's drastic actions they can take. So on one hand, I'm kind of happy that we're kind of thwarting them in some ways, but that also kind of worries me, because we're limiting their options, which makes them have to escalate. It's like a use of force thing. They're like, they push us this hard, and if we resist, then they push us a little bit harder, right? And if it gets to the point where we resist too much, I'm just afraid of them, taking a sledgehammer to the wall, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, your point is very well taken, and I agree. I think that because we are, we've developed these new platforms, and we're all over the place. We're like the little ants that are just running around, going, "Hey, hey, here's what's happening," and more people are finding us. The platforms that we're on are becoming bigger and bigger, and of course, they totally control the major platforms, but even those platforms are beginning to show cracks in them, which is really cool. And the fact that Elon Musk, brought up all the discrepancies with Twitter and other fake bots, and he's just pointing out to the mainstream how contrived it is. So all that stuff is really awesome. But definitely your point about the more we take away their options like that, that things that we can point out immediately, the more drastic their reaction can be. And I think that's totally an option. And it has been an option in the past, especially when we've seen times where the financial system is really starting to fall apart. And we know that the fiat money system has been falling apart totally. And they escalated that process by just going nuts, $3.5 trillion worth of Rona relief money, AKA bribe money. And, you throw all that kind of money in. Actually, most people say it was well over $6 trillion. Not all of it was publicly disclosed. So when you throw that kind of money into an economy, you're going to have massive inflation beyond what we already had. And so that limits their options too, on a financial perspective. The other part of that is in the States here, you've got the Social Security programs. They've been dipping into that fund so heavily for the last 50, 60 years that they know that they don't have the funds to keep that going for, who knows how long, probably maybe a few years if they're lucky. So they're looking at ways to, I think, number one, kill off a bunch of older people that may want to tap into those resources. And two, just maybe totally collapse the financial system so that they can put in their reset financial system, which Mr. Klaus has been telling us about, where we'll own nothing and be so happy. I mean, it's really insane to us, those who think and care about other people, but to them, it's very pragmatic and something that sounds like a fun idea, don't you think?
Well, the way like now that it's out in the public, I can say what I couldn't have said before, which is that was what they were grooming me for, was this World Economic Forum, right? And I've always known that was coming. Now that it is kind of out in the open, everything's out in the open kind of for a purpose. And what that purpose is because they knew that with the coming of the internet and the expansion of social media, all of us being able to talk to each other more or less, that their secrecy, that this veil that they've been able to hide behind for thousands of years now, was going to break. They knew that was coming. So they've kind of set it up in such a way that very similar to like the Pizzagate thing, where you take something that's got a level of truth to it, but then you add a level of absurdity to it, and then you let something like QAnon run it through the mill, and it turns into something that is crazy sounding, meanwhile has some truth to it, so it buries the truth in the crazy. And so they're kind of doing that in a lot of different ways with how they're kind of showing us how much of a joke everything was, right? Like it was, I use the presidents as an example. It's like they put Donald Trump in office, and if that didn't convince you that this is all a joke, let's put a man with dementia up in his place, right? Like if what Obama did wasn't bad enough, where it's like this completely two-faced character, and that didn't tip you off, then here's one extreme, here's another, and if you don't get it by now, that's kind of on you. So they're kind of trying to play that game with the public, I think, in a lot of different ways, which is why they're not, I don't think they're putting much effort into hiding anything anymore. I think they're kind of letting all of this stuff be exposed. They want people to fight back at this point. They're trying to push basically those civil wars in places. They basically want us to eat each other and ourselves. The way that I wrote it into the blog, I called it the destruction of Rome, and the new Rome, which is the United States. They've kind of had this agenda to basically keep pitting Americans against each other until they can create a civil war, because they know that like once there's a civil war going on, then they can do things like let China take advantage of that or let Russia take advantage of that. Meanwhile, all of these people work for the same thing. These countries aren't really separate, but that's the optics that they need to kind of show the public in order to collapse one system. And once they have that one system, and of course, if you want to collapse a system, you would go for its throat, right? And who's the superpower? So you would go after that. And once you collapse that system and then come in with the solution, right? Which is the reset, the new way of doing things, maybe the one world government or a variation of that, or something that starts off as a variation of that can grow into that. But that's eventually where it's going to go. It's just a matter of which paths they take. And I think they're making it very obvious that they're willing to take baby steps in multiple directions, kind of all simultaneously, because that kind of does confuse us. I mean, we're talking on a day where the abortion thing just happened, right? So that's another example, which is kind of hilarious, because that's kind of our Stockholm syndrome, showing it's like they didn't really give us any rights to begin with, but we believe that they did so badly that we're infuriated right now that they've taken them away. It's actually quite funny, but I understand the rest of it. I'm not, anyways. But that's kind of this position that we're in with them, where they can kind of do whatever they want, because their goal is to get us to fight back.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, because they've spent so much time and effort trying to drive a wedge, between the races, between the genders or non-genders, or no more binary. We've got 64 genders now, and yeah, it's so insane. We've got the puppets. They seem to have everything really locked down, because you got all the puppets controlling all these countries. You got Macron, proud World Economic Forum member, Castro Trudeau in your country, and you've got the bumbling Biden here, and cackling Kamala. I mean, it's a comedy. It really is a comedy when you look at these characters and what they do, and I don't know. I mean, ultimately, what is the high end game? What, the true spiritual from the cosmos, looking at this little realm? Is it just for us to see the folly of our existence? Is it, I think maybe in some cases it's for us to learn and grow, but I think some of us have been around a long time and really just wanted to kind of play in the game. What do you think?
Well, we're going through an evolution right now. This planet is, anyways, and so I think a lot of people kind of incarnated here are here for that. That's why so many of you out there had a mission coming in, right? It's like this is it. It's not as bright and sexy and as multicolored as we all maybe imagined it to be, but this is it. We're living through it, and anytime what's kind of making this one different is we have this group of people who think that they can somehow beat nature and control this evolution and push us directly into transhumanism and not really, give us a choice. That never works. Nature always finds some way. So that's where we're kind of at this really strange time right now, is because, in one sense, nature is like opening the portal, so to speak, to give us more understanding and give us more everything we need. And we also have this group of people who believe that they control this planet, trying to shut it down. And I think what's going on with, the collective, if you will, is kind of similar to what I was just talking about with the rights thing, is like starting to learn self-responsibility. We have kind of had this dynamic on this planet where humans have been kind of subservient to beings that are more advanced or don't live here, what we call ETs, things like that, intelligences from outside of humanity. And now that that's kind of not the case, the people who were privy to all those toys and all of that information are trying to use all that information and also all those toys to then achieve their agenda. But they're just like us. So it's not the same dynamic, and it's not going to play out the way that they want it to. So I think that basically what's happening is, planet Earth, if you will, is being given back to humanity finally. And we're going to have to go through this period of a balancing act where we kind of wake up to the responsibility of that. We start learning how to take on the responsibility of that. And then we actually do take the steps to get that responsibility. Unfortunately, I think in order for us to get there, the systems that are in place that had a completely different agenda are going to have to fall apart. How we get through the period of them falling apart is going to kind of define, I guess, our lifetime or the rest of our lifetimes, because we're going to see all this technology come out. We're going to have this kind of push and pull relationship between, the organic technology, what we actually are as magical creative beings, and the digital mimics of that. Sorry, I have a cat, and I'm just not sure if you guys can hear her.
Yeah, she wants to chime in too.
Chloe, just come in here. Shush. I know. Sorry. Anyways,
she knows, and she's really tired of this whole BS game.
She wants to come in and fight the other one.
Anyway, sorry to break your chain of thought there, but yeah, that's it. It's really fascinating to watch that dynamic of these transhumanist types that think they're going to live forever inside their cyborg, robot. And but how is that cyborg going to have any real feeling, emotion? No, it's just not. It's just going to be pretty much mental, cerebral. What a boring and just absolutely terrible existence that would be. But yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, at least not to most of us. Something else that you and I have talked about before that I'm always curious about. You mentioned the parents, and I know you talked about that in your blog too, and that the last parent, I think was there 21 of them originally, and the last female one left a few years ago.
It got down to 3 and 2 of them left. There's only one left, and she's not really involved much. She's kind of just she's been a bit of what would be a source of information for them as they transition, kind of like a living memory bank. They can ask questions of if they misplace some information somewhere within their system or whatever, almost like a consultant, because she's seen various levels of control implemented over thousands of year period of time. She kind of, if you've lived through a bunch of resets, you kind of become an expert on the process. So they do tap into her knowledge bank, if you will, in that sense, but she doesn't really make any decisions or do anything really for them anymore in that way. What's left, I guess, is the whatever covens were left behind the parents when the parents left, which would be very, very minimized. Basically, the reset that we're seeing in the world has also happened within them. They've more or less rebranded what we call the Illuminati. And I lovingly call it the Umbrella Corporation, which I stole from Resident Evil because it's just a lot more similar to that, where they've got all the pharmaceutical industries, as well as all the banks, as well as all of the like big tech companies. But if you realize kind of the way that society has come or developed to right now, the tech companies are actually in control of everything. So that's why I've called it that, is because it's not the families anymore, and it's not that old structure that the Draco had put in place. It's this new structure that is based on these tech companies that kind of rule everything through technology. It's like what they're kind of exposing in American Gods, with the new gods versus the old gods, and the end result of that is basically the new gods have won, and they now have control of everything. And so their approach is different. They rely almost solely on technology, and I think that's where our advantage starts to come in.
Yeah, I think you're right, because we can, even though it's not our technology, we are able to use it to, at least to an extent, to kind of point out what's happening, and hopefully enough people will recognize it and then not want to put up with it. And we do see social changes happening slowly here and there. We see people standing up for their rights, which never happened before, really. And the fact that they forced their hand on us in the last couple of years has actually sped that process up, which is really great. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, what's left of the influence beyond human in this world? Is there any influence? Who are they? What are they? If there's, or is there just nothing left but the programmed humans that want to put in their new world order government? What do you think?
Well, I mean, there's humans with souls in it that we wouldn't consider human. Obviously, still in positions of power. We have a very heavy AI influence because of their reliance on technology. So there's that. But in terms of like, the old dynamic that we had kind of been faced with of like some type of invading species, we don't really have that. Because we're going through a period of evolution, what we have is a bunch of competing species that are already here, and they all look like us, and we are us, right? Like from the hybrid programs to the SRA psychopath program, as I like to call it, which is basically the introduction of psychopathy, sociopathy, narcissism into the human gene pool. And then now we have, now we're stepping into a third generation of children raised with technology, which simply from inception to birth and then beyond changes the way they're wired. So they're not wired the same way you and I are at our age. They're wired completely differently because they're now three generations deep of genetic memory of technology, which you and I don't have. So these changes, like that's where the different, I don't know, infighting, if you will, between factions really is like these different species basically competing for the top rung as we step through this evolution. Whether we're all aware of each other and we're aware of the competition we're in, that's kind of where we're at. And so, just imagine yourself being, any, name them, ET species, looking at a period of that on any realm, on any planet. You wouldn't really want to interfere unless you were the type who was looking to control. And because this planet has just had enough of that, I suppose, and I think our planet itself has finally stood up and said, no, let my children sort this shit out. We are kind of in a period where we're doing that. And unfortunately, yes, there are lingering echoes and ghosts of past systems, past ET species, past technologies that have been used against us over the time that are still present and are still here, but they're almost like contained within the bubble of this. So it's a lot different than having something invasive. So I guess that's a long-winded answer for the question, is just, anything, what's going on here is kind of, for all external observers, sorry, they're just kind of letting us sort it out. And we have the perfect opportunity because, our opponents in this particular battle, if you want to look at it, put it in that type of terminology, is we're on equal footing. They rely on technology that is, got an on and off switch and a finite power source. And we are a technology that doesn't have an on and off switch. It has something called will and an infinite energy source. So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That makes so much sense. And that is absolutely true. They have used us as an energy source, haven't they, for a long, long time. And they've used our angst and our suffering and all that, nasty stuff to help power their systems. And yeah, The Matrix. What a great movie that was. I always go back to it because there was so much truth in there. And so, gee, maybe that's why I called this show Inside the Matrix. I don't know. Could be.
on that topic, end of energy, something to kind of watch out for in terms of technology and how that develops. You kind of hear the talk in the world right now because of the climate change and trying to push us all onto electric cars. The idea of like we need new battery technology. Well, the new battery technology is us. DARPA's already exposed technology that does this, that just uses our biochemical reactionary technology body to create the energy source that it will. So that's kind of the more, Chloe, can you get off of there, please? The more literal version of the battery from the Matrix. If you remember the movie where they were using us as an energy
Oh,
source,
yeah. Yep.
our new world and the technologies that they're going to start integrating are going to rely on an energy source that actually relies on us. It's like a perverted version of what they used to use pyramids and other megalithic structures on the planet to do, or Tesla type technology, only they're wiring us in. And that's what, the rollout of 5G and all of the metals in us and, different things that they're trying to get us to take into our bodies all play in, is because these are conductive materials that allow us to connect to this network that will eventually power all of this technology.
Okay, so that sparks a thought to me when we talk about ancient technology and things like that. There's been a lot of people now that, the whole Tartaria, mud flood, history questions. These are all real interesting things. And it seems to me that, we can keep going down all these different rabbit holes and they're all fascinating and interesting, but are we ever going to find our real history of this world and what has happened here before? Is there anyone out there who actually knows, that's still around? And how about this? Is it possible that the only parent that's left, even though she's kind of, kept out of it, would she be willing to come forward and tell us history? Because, I think a lot of people, we just want to know. We want to know what the hell's happened here before, what technologies we had and forgot about, or all that kind of stuff. I find it fascinating. I don't know about you.
Well, I mean, I've had the advantage of knowing a lot of those people who lived through it, right? And even her, like I've been able to have conversations with her about history. That's why I hold the views that I do on a lot of those subjects, and kind of see how basically what we have a tendency to do in this community is take a bunch of different things and try to generalize them down into a one event or a one explanation for everything. And that's what we're doing again with Tartaria. We're basically taking the fact that civilization is a lot older, and there's been many different iterations of it, and every time we do that, we just we build on top of the old one. Sometimes we build to replicate, sometimes we build something new, but we always just keep building on the old one. And I know that the basic theory tries to tie it down into a one event, and I understand why people want to do that. It's easy, but it's not a one event thing. It's a different locations, different events, different reasons, different scenarios. And it's just, it's a lot of different information, a lot of different events, a lot of different characters involved, a lot of different moving parts. So there's that. It's a very complicated, long, kind of irrelevant story in a lot of ways, because you can basically summarize the story down into, every I use a 200-year ballpark. I know that I've heard someone else using a more narrow ballpark, but the idea is the same. The concept is the same. Every so many years, we have these resets, which are kind of like a changing of the guard, so to speak. And sometimes along with that comes a destruction of the old in order to build a new. Not always, but sometimes and quite often. And now they have a lot of different technologies that can destroy things that to us, because of our misprogramming by science, would look like, something like a flood, something like that. But they could also be some type of weapon. They could also be something a little bit more elaborate than a flood or a mud flood or any of those things. And both could simultaneously be true. There could be a flood in one place, a mud flood in another, and some type of detonation in another. It all depends on what they were trying to erase and what they were trying to recreate afterwards. So it's really just a long, complicated story. And the other thing to keep in mind is, kind of going into my own experience, I've had this conversation with multiple parents who have lived through it. I've had this conversation with elders who have gone beyond it. I've read books and seen other things through technologies we're not supposed to have that have documented different periods of this time. And there's variables between all of these stories. So if I were to somehow convince her to come sit in this chair for me and tell you this history, I couldn't guarantee to you that you could believe her or that she would even be 100% correct. Her memory is fallible just like ours is. Probably a lot better than the average human, but still fallible. And you don't see everything, right? Like, you kind of see things from where you were during that period of time. You hear stories to fill in gaps, but it's not like, when this big world event happens, you get this above the earth view, look down on it all happening and get to see every detail of it either, because that doesn't exist. And even our different recordings of it, that's like a different book written in a different place about the same event during the same time in a different location, are going to contain different details. So trying to put it together as one coherent story, may be impossible because of the way that it's been recorded. But we can kind of not get caught up in the details so much and just kind of look at the gist of things. Like, what does this mean? Oh, that means that they're very good at what they're now presenting to us as the Great Reset. They've done this before. Some aspect of them wants us to know that they've done this before. That's why they're pushing it. Don't think that they don't push things like flat Earth, QAnon, Tartaria through our system, because they do. We don't discover these things. They tip us off to them. It's been happening. This is what Alex Jones's job is. But anyways, basically, it's because they're getting ready to do it again. And they want us to have a very limited view of what it is so that we don't notice it as it happens. These things don't happen as like one big event and then rebuild. These things happen as a bunch of little detonations and then rebuild. So that's what we're going to be witnessing over the next few years. And I guess if I'm right or wrong, we'll know very shortly.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about those cycles you're talking about, and I think one guy was referring to every 138 years there's some kind of a big major shift, and that sometimes the elite tend to hide because they're not sure which one's going to be the big monster one or whatever, which I find fascinating. But let's back up just a little bit and explain. Some people are not going to know what we're talking about when we say the parents. You and I have talked about it before, but there's going to be some people out there going, parents, what are they talking about? Parents, who's the parents and who's this last parent and all that? Maybe give us a quick synopsis of the parents and how they came about and all that kind of stuff.
So about 13,000 years ago, Draco were in control of the planet. They wanted a structure that would eventually bring us to, kind of today, which is like what you guys know as the Illuminati structure. When they started that by taking, I guess, one and then two individuals and presenting them with let's just call it a technology or a method to preserve their life or extend their life. Sorry, basically make them what we would call immortal. They don't just die of natural causes.
Hey, Shane, can I interrupt you for just a second? Could you move to your right just a little bit? The sun is hitting you really hard and it's kind of washing out your face. So yeah, to your right, maybe, because
right?
like half of your face is like just a big blob of light, which is kind of cool, actually. We want to be able to see you when you're talking.
Like my beard or something. Oh no, it's that way. So this.
You see what I mean? Yeah. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No worries. Hopefully that helps some.
Yeah.
So yes, what the function of the parents was to be basically beings that would survive all of these different resets as they went through in order to hold the structure in place. And basically, they were the top of the Draco's pyramid, if you will, or the missing capstone. Um, it started as 3, it ended up being 21. And what their job was basically to look after the Illuminati families, as well as record, document, and control everything as it went through. The rest of the structure is they kind of had their own covens who they passed on the methods of their own life extension technology to, more or less, so they would have company or a little bit of a substructure to their agendas. And yeah, they have lived through the whole period from the time that they're made. Excuse me, my memory for numbers is bad. The oldest one was 11,000 years old, and I think the youngest one was 4,000 or 6,000 years old.
Okay. And when did most of them decide that they wanted to leave, and why?
The Draco were giving control back, as absurd as that really is, but that was what was happening, which meant they were no longer necessary. And by the time I would have encountered them, what I can kind of tell from personal interaction is none of them liked what they've had to do for all of this time. None of them have been happy, but they live forever, and they can't. They're not allowed to just take themselves out. There's a method. They eventually were allowed, but anyways, they weren't allowed. So they basically had to keep performing a role they didn't want for a very long time. So once they had the opportunity to get out of that role, they took the opportunity, and that was right around the time I wrote the blog, so about 2016, 2017. Did not happen in one day. It was a gradual process. But I think I answered the question.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for clarifying that, because I'm sure a lot of people were wondering what the heck we were talking about with the parents and all, and their relationship with the Draco way back. At this point in time, we hear a lot about 2030 being like sort of a drop dead date that the World Economic Forum, Bilderberg types, Illuminati types want to have everything fully in place. And then there's the date of 2040 being one of those big time reset dates. So what are your thoughts on that? Are those valid ideas, or is that just, people throwing stuff out there that just doesn't make any sense?
I think first of all, the plan has been delayed a bit, and I think that's the jump between 2030 and 2040. The reset, if you will, is supposed to start sometime in around 2024. I kind of personally look towards what they put into movies for their dates, because that seems to be, in hindsight, where it ends up being more accurate. Because I hear from a variety of sources a variety of different dates, and what I mean by that is, like, I still have different sources within the Illuminati that I am in contact with sometimes, and they all have different dates for it. Even the structure that I was raised through, I was always presented with different dates and different numbers for shit. It was just normal. I got used to it. That's why I don't retain numbers, I think, because I think that they're, I think that they're all off. But anyways, I don't really know if it's going to be as simple as a 2030 either. I think it's what I look at is where they want us to go, which is what they're now calling the metaverse, right? They want to put us into a alternate reality. They have this vision of that as if they're going to put the whole planet into an alternate reality, but that may be a whole other conversation. Anyways, they're going to put us into this metaverse. That's where they want to get us to. They put out a movie, Ready Player One, and in that movie, they basically show you that idea. And in the movie, what they said was the first version of it came online in 2024, and I believe the movie is set in 2048. So that tells me that they're probably looking at something beyond 2040 to have us in what their new world is, and what they're literally calling their kingdom of God in some circles, which is, sorry about the light, which is the alternate reality, metaverse, whatever it ends up being named. It was the oasis in Ready Player One. Currently, Meta is calling it the metaverse, but there's obviously going to be various versions of that. So what it ends up being called is irrelevant. The idea being that we no longer live in reality, and that we do live in these like little boxes stacked on top of each other and just exist in a virtual space, shown to us in a variety of different little ways, like Black Mirror and Ready Player One and Free Guy
Upload.
and all kinds of
Upload
things.
is another one. I don't know if you've seen that
Upload.
one. Yeah. Yeah, that brings to mind a lot of people talk about, and I think has some validity, is that, we're in a simulation. So we're in a holographic simulation. And I think really that's what creation is. To me, that's what it seems like it is. And a lot of people have the idea that this simulation that we're in was actually copied from the original simulation, the original creation, and that we're in sort of a stolen one that is being really limited in scope and to the original, and that's what we're seeking to free ourselves from. Any thoughts on that concept and idea?
I did a machine series that I called The Machine, through which I go through how I believe kind of exactly that what has happened is, the agenda that I just laid out, where they want to get us into the metaverse, was successful. And we literally went into a matrix type existence where a machine has more or less taken over the planet, not in a functional sense, but just like basically closed it off from the universe, removed us from it, put us in pods, fed us into this digital version of it with the intention of healing nature. And then things get all fucked up. But that's all for the series. That's all in the series. But I think a lot of different people are coming to that conclusion now, because I'm correct about what I'm saying on it, which is that is kind of what has happened, is we're living through basically an echo of a period we actually did live through. And that's probably why it feels so familiar and why it seems so real, is because we remember it. But basically, we have a simulation that is playing back to us the period that we went through. Milestones, as I call them, all remain the same. And then the variation of our illusion of free will adds the kind of color or the variation from there. But that's a lot to unpack and explain, obviously, but I personally believe it. I did a whole series on it. I'm about to, on my Patreon, revisit it in July. I'm re-editing all the videos together and talking about it in more detail as well. But yeah, I think that just about every day I hear someone else come to that conclusion, which just, at least from my perspective, because it's already what I experienced and therefore believe, we are in. So.
Yeah, that's it. Sure seems like it to me. That's exactly where it was and where it is now. And imagine picturing a whole bunch of really sickly people living in tiny little cubes with their virtual reality goggles on, all the waking hours of the day, living their lives vicariously in this strange, meta world. Oh my God, what a pathetic, insane way to waste a life, right?
I think
But
if we were to go back 30 years and say that about a lot of men today, we would probably be saying something similar, right? Where it's like,
yeah,
right, like if we kind of look at the progression of, I'm sorry to pick on men or any men that are out there, but we look at the kind of progression of men over the last 30 years, just add 30 years of that same trajectory, and it's not looking good. It's actually looking like tiny little gray aliens, to be honest, but
yeah.
it's not looking good.
Well, that brings to mind the whole idea of people from the future coming back into this simulation to give us messages and things like that. That seems real valid, doesn't it? I mean, that at some point in the future, we'll have the ability, probably an organic ability, to move from one realm to another without having to use the artificial technology. So that's fascinating to me. And then you've got that guy. What was that guy's name that went to the Pentagon back in the 50s, early 60s? Oh, I can't. People, I'm sure people in chat are going or in the comments are going to go, "Where's this guy? Can't you remember?" Um, Valiant Thor, or was that it? Valiant something or other.
My memory is
Anyway,
bad
so
too.
I think he was one of those characters, that came in to uh, do something to try and warn people about what was coming or what was planned that was detrimental to the overall human development, human well-being. And I think there have been others too. And there's people out there now that claim to be in contact with a lot of these beings, otherworldly beings, other dimensional beings, multidimensional beings, interdimensional beings, and all that. And a lot of them have the same message, like, "Hey, wake up." And it always boils down to this, that we have the power. Human beings, we are creators. We are creator beings. We have the power and ability to totally emancipate ourselves and create something amazing here. But until enough of us get to that conscious level of awareness and appreciation, we're not there yet. And so therein lies the game, to me, is the dark side's trying to squash it down and keep our vibration low. The rest of us are trying to point out the potential and say, "Hey, this is what we can do, let's do it."
Yeah, and I think that we're entering a point where nature is going to start reminding us too, right? Like nature is going to start reminding people in its own subtle ways of the same thing. You and I have been telling people for a long time now that, like, there's more to this, and you do have more power over it. And it's something that I've been kind of telling my own audience, and I'll say it here too. Whenever we go through a period of evolution, the universe kind of compensates by opening up the frequencies by which we can create. A lot of times evolutions can get really fucking messy and require a pretty big cleanup on the other side. And so, as kind of a way to help that process, nature does this where it opens up these frequencies during this time, so that the creator beings that are here or choose to incarnate here in our specific situation, or in another situation where, like, say there was something bigger and outside beings had to actually come here, they would have a more potent potential for magic in order to help stabilize and balance the planet. And that's true for us during this evolution too. So people will, in their own way, kind of rediscover their own relationship with magic, or make the decision to go transhuman. And it's kind of like, that's the choice of evolution, I guess, that we're kind of faced with. And I think that we're not going to see, like, it just go one way. We've kind of had this concept of a breakaway civilization in the alternative community. Where that concept actually comes from is us, the ones that aren't necessarily going to take the transhuman route and are going to break away and maybe go back into the woods, so to speak, and rediscover our true nature, if you want to look at it like that, or rediscover magic and take the alternative path. And yeah, I think that this is just what we're going to watch play out. How it's all going to play out, it's not written in stone, other than I believe it's an echo, and therefore it is. But aside from that, there's a certain amount of fluctuation to it. And that's, going back to something I said earlier, so many people out there say that they feel like they were here for some reason, they have some type of mission. This is it, guys. This is why you came. This is what you wanted. Now it's time to take the responsibility of your choice on and act right.
Yeah. Get your shit together, baby. Yeah. And that's where we're at. And we're still in the middle of it. We're in the thick of it. But now it's really becoming much more well defined, what we need to do and what we're up against. I think in most people's minds that are at least aware of the game and aware of the challenge in front of us. So, Shane, I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with us today. It's always fun to get together with you and talk about these things, because you have such a great insight and inside track because of your life that you've had, and we really appreciate you being with us today.
Always fun, and I'm always willing to talk to you, brother. I love and respect you a great deal. Love that you're doing this and you continue to do this despite all of this insanity. And yeah, and it's always fun to chat.
Love you too, man. Thank you so much. And everybody else out there, we'll see you inside the Matrix.